judge, and I'm going to introduce and also moderate the event. Students Against Mass Incarceration was one sponsor for the event. Also here at Howard, the Muslim Student Association sponsored. And Black is Back in D.C. And people have literature tables at the back. There's also All African Coalition People's Party. It works out of UDC. Has a table back there. And there's lots of information before you leave. I'm with two organizations that sponsored this, the National Coalition on Political Assassinations and the new Museum of Hidden History. And this table back there with some of our literature, our upcoming national conference in Dallas on political assassinations this November. And also back there are 10 points of agreement that we've hammered out in the research community on political assassinations that you might find interesting as an outline. And we're at politicalassassination.com, and our event is being live cast out through that and maybe some other websites around the country. So I'm pleased to be the person to introduce a number of people that are going to be speaking to you tonight who have some expertise on our focus, which is to talk about the life and the assassination of Malcolm X, to talk about who killed Malcolm X and why they killed him, and what it was about not only domestic politics that surrounded the events of that time, but also international politics that led to it. And we have several scholars and experts here to address some of those questions. And we're going to be doing some other events for the coalition. I'll announce them at the end. For those that don't know me, or other than my organizational affiliations, I am a longtime researcher into political assassinations and government crimes, and I've lectured at universities and on hundreds of radio and television shows, and I'm the author of the book, Judge for Yourself. And I was a former senior congressional aide to Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and I helped her to draft the Martin Luther King Records Act, which has still not gotten to the floor of Congress, and the Tupac Shakur Records Act, and also over 100 actionable articles of impeachment against President George Bush. So I continue to do research and investigation into these crimes. I don't want to take a lot of the agenda. I want to leave time for questions. I would just say that the general framework that I feel and we're presenting tonight that the assassination of Malcolm fits into is a government operation that was conceived fairly early on to both surveil and then eventually disrupt any efforts at organizing for social justice, social change, civil rights, or organizing among African American and other communities. And this really dates back to the end of World War I, when a Colonel Vandeman with Army intelligence began to collect files on radicals of all sorts. He was spying, for example, on the grandfather of Dr. Martin Luther King. And his files, which were quite extensive, millions and millions of people that he kept track of, became the basis for the Palmer raids and the roundup of radicals and deportation of people. And then his files were eventually given over to the John Edgar Hoover and the FBI. And so Army intelligence continued also to spy up to the present day on civilians, along with other elements of the military intelligence and the DIA. A lot of people have heard of the CIA, but the DIA is the Defense Intelligence Agency. And it's 10 times the budget and 100 times the employees of the CIA and the FBI combined. And in the 60s, there was a program that was initiated out of a special division of the FBI that was formed at the end of World War II by William Sullivan and Arthur D. DeLoach, called Division 5, the Domestic Division. And this division initiated the COINTELPRO program, or counterintelligence program. But also there was a program that was both national and international in scope, trying to counter attempts at organizing here and political change abroad that wasn't acceptable to the system. or its foreign investments, and that the CIA program was called Chaos, and that also figures into the history of the attacks on Malcolm X. And then those two organizations worked with Army intelligence. For instance, Army intelligence had plans. I talked about this with Jared before, and he found it quite amusing, but the National War College, a guy named Louis Gafrida, who later became director of the Federal Emergency Management Association, his master's thesis, his PhD thesis at the Army War College was how could you round up all African Americans in the United States and put them into concentration camps? And Jared Ball said, well, what do you think if I told my faculty advisor I wanted to say, well, you know, a paper on how to round up all the white citizens in the United States and put them in concentration camps? But this was an acceptable topic for the War College, and there were plans for massive incarceration and other kinds of disruption of not only those groups but other ethnic groups in the United States and people who were working for peace or social justice or social change. And one of the plans would have led to martial law called Operation Garden Plot. It was developed by the military, and Garden Plot had a subgroup called Operation Lantern Spike, which was an anti-riot function, supposedly. It was Operation Lantern Spike that was spying on Dr. King up to the day of his death, and close spying, meaning looking at his trash and listening, putting bugs in the room and listening to him. And there were military snipers in a nearby building that had Dr. King in their sights, had the assassin, not James Earl Ray, but the real assassin, not managed to shoot him. They had military intelligence people as backup, and they had Army intelligence spies with cameras filming the full assassination as well up on the roof of the building. So it's not, when you think about it, you think about FBI, you think about CIA in this regard, but military intelligence plays a very central role, especially plays a role abroad. The CIA is a think tank, but they have to go to the DIA and the Office of Naval Intelligence, the largest and oldest intelligence branch, to get anything done, because they're the people that are going to carry out the operations. And they weren't just operations abroad, they were domestic operations and continue to be domestic operations. And part of that was the penetration of police departments by these elements. And the changing of the function of police departments, not only as sources of intelligence for political purpose and attack, but also militarizing the police department in the United States. And I wrote a paper in 1985 called Move in the Militarization of Police about the Philadelphia attack on the MOVE headquarters and the background of the people who did the attacking, and also how the late second attack they practiced on a military base and used C4 explosive, which was not for civilian use legally, to practice bombing the MOVE house in south of Philly there. So these operations move across time. Waco was very militarized. They created joint task forces, and they combined FBI and National Guard, elements of the CIA, and local police, national police, and the joint task forces would carry out attacks. Those have merged into centers called fusion centers, who spy on civilians for all these agencies. And Cynthia McKinney, one of our speakers, was a target of a fusion center out in Texas. And they do not association by guilt, but guilt by association. And they make lists of people and keep track of people and post people across the country. So it was in that context that memos came out of the FBI in the early 1950s, but certainly through the 60s, and through the CIA, and National Security Action Memoranda that came out, and the National Security Council, to oppose black militant groups, to oppose the rise of any leadership that would threaten the system by organizing people of color. And specifically, the title of the talk tonight, The Black Messiah, is from one of those memos where they talked about not wanting the rise of a black messiah, and they gave an example. It was redacted out, but you can tell that they're talking about Malcolm X as one of the targets. And also the idea that when they eliminated these leaders that they didn't like, that they wanted to replace them with more acceptable, or what they called clean Negroes, that would come in behind their place and be manipulable. So that was part of it, and also part of COINTELPRO was to disrupt and penetrate and destroy organizations. And so I think you'll hear tonight that there's a history both within the Nation of Islam, starting long decades and decades ago, more than 50 years ago, almost from its inception, and later of Malcolm X's organization, of police elements that were in there spying, they were in there disrupting, they were in there creating differences and flaming differences, exacerbating them in order to manipulate the groups that they wanted to destroy. And so that's some of the history of what led to it, but it's a deeper history in terms of Malcolm's international politics and the many reasons why he became a target of this system and, in their view, had to be eliminated. And also what the meaning was of his life, what message he had to people, not only people of color, but people around the world, and what hope he brought to them through his analysis and his talks and his political work. And that's a large part not only to destroy the man, but in the case of Malcolm X, Dr. King, even the Kennedy brothers, it was to destroy a certain hope for social change and to make people feel that they couldn't organize themselves or be safe against the system. And these remain, in our view, of the Coalition on Political Assassinations, unsolved murders. They're murders whose history has not yet been released to us, even though it should belong to us. Their documentary record is not out as yet in full, and they are murders that remain open and unsolved. And so we commemorate on different anniversaries. This is the 47th anniversary of Malcolm X, of his assassination. We commemorate them and try to have information about them. So from that, I'm going to move on to the first speaker, and we will try to have time at the end for questions. We have an information-packed and speaker-packed agenda, but I thought we'd start with a little bit of the history of COINTELPRO, and asked come down from Baltimore, John Potash. And John Potash is he attended graduate school at the Columbia University, and he started a national award-winning school newspaper called Social Justice Action Quarterly. He first published an article in there with the theme of this book, Claustrophobia's Spring of 1995 issue. That's a book that he's got out. And then on COINTELPRO, and then he published a larger piece in Covert Action Quarterly, a magazine started by CIA whistleblower Phil Agee. He's also published the Z Magazine, the Baltimore City Paper, Baltimore Chronicle, Rock Creek Free Press, Will Work for Food, New Political Poems, and Revival Spoken Word from Lollapalooza 1994. He accumulated thousands of government documents, including court documents, FBI documents, CIA documents, and he conducted over 100 interviews, and he filed a Freedom of Information Act request for Tupac's FBI file, which he was told was over 4,000 pages. Only 99 of them were released. And the subtitle of his book is Intelligence's Murderous Targeting Tupac, Martin Luther King, Malcolm, the Panthers, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, rappers, and linked ethnic leftists. And is that all? Okay. And he has a slideshow for you as well. So this is John Potash.
A slideshow to show you some of the sources of all this material, because it's going to seem pretty out there if you don't see from where it came from. I'd written a book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders, and I'm going to read a speech because I'm going to try to keep it 20 minutes or less. Usually I speak off the top of my head, but it goes way too long when I do that. So, give me one moment. First published an article on this subject locally in 95 and then expanded in 1998 for Covert Action Quarterly, as John Jett just said, and which was started by a CIA whistleblower. And I first released the FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders in late 2007. It contains over 1,000 endnotes documenting sources for what I'm going to present to you tonight. This includes the FBI letter I received confirming my payment for copies of over 4,000 pages in the FBI file on Tupac Shakur, as you can see here from the U.S. Department of Justice, following the Freedom of Information Act, if you guys are familiar with that. Now, Malcolm X's life and times are closely connected with the Shakur family. The Shakurs had leadership positions in many important black leftist groups. Evidence supports U.S. intelligence murderously targeted all of these groups. Since most presenters tonight will likely focus more exclusively on Malcolm X, I'm going to focus more on the interconnect between U.S. intelligence targeting of Malcolm and 3 generations of Shakurs, especially Tupac. Malcolm's father, Earl Little, headed a local Michigan chapter of Marcus Garvey's United Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. At the same time, Salyuddin Abba Shakur was part of the UNIA in New York. Garvey was shot, imprisoned, deported, and exiled for his activist work. Earl Little had his house burned down and then was found murdered with evidence supporting that the local version of the Ku Klux Klan killed him. A Delaware professor published a book on an FBI agent in the KKK in Alabama that found the agent present at virtually every major racial incident, including murders. That agent failed to arrest anyone, and he regularly protected several of the Klan leaders from arrest. The FBI reportedly opened their file with Malcolm X after Malcolm wrote a letter to President Truman. In that letter, Malcolm stated he was a communist and opposed the Korean War. By his late 20s, Malcolm X was a rising leader in the Nation of Islam, and the FBI started keeping him under surveillance. By the late 1950s, Malcolm X headed the Nation of Islam Mosque in Harlem. Soon after, Abba Shakur joined his mosque and became part of Malcolm's inner circle. From the late 50s on, Malcolm X's leadership in New York also helped him meet with Third World revolutionaries and African leaders in the New York-based United Nations. This influence likely contributed to the U.S. intelligence's attempts on Malcolm's life. Evidence supports that U.S. intelligence first attempted to murder Malcolm X in 1958. New York police ran into Malcolm's home and shot up his office. Undercover FBI agent John X. Ali had infiltrated Malcolm's group and moved in with him. He could provide police with a floor plan of Malcolm's home. John X. Ali also reportedly played a part in the firebombing of Malcolm's home in 1965. By that time, several of Abba Shakur's sons had joined Malcolm X's new activist organization, the Organization of African American Unity. This included Shakur's biological sons, Lumumba and Zaid, as well as his adopted son, Mutulu, seen here. Malcolm X named his Organization of Afro-American Unity after the Organization of African Unity. This latter group, the OAU, was started by African leaders that had won independence from the European colonizers. Malcolm X was the only African American allowed to attend their meetings. Malcolm said that most of these independence leaders had taken on socialism for their countries, as it would ideally give populations ownership of their country's resources. Capitalism tended to develop a super wealthy ruling class and keep people on wages that had been barely surviving at the bottom. Malcolm said that American companies tried to move in to exploit these African countries for their oil, mineral resources, and potential cheap labor. Malcolm warned the African leaders that these corporate owners were racist and looking to swindle them. Many of these African leaders started changing their minds about $100 million deals with the American corporate owners. For this and several other reasons, the CIA, which was started by these top corporate-owning families, wanted to assassinate Malcolm X. By this time, Malcolm had visited Mecca and taken the name El Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. Some of the other reasons the wealthiest families would have wanted their U.S. intelligence foot soldiers to assassinate Malcolm X included his opposition to the Vietnam War and his bringing civil rights to the United Nations as a human rights issue. Since the CIA director supervised the other 14-plus U.S. intelligence agency directors, and the FBI personnel overlaps police intelligence, this operation would be easy to direct in Harlem. Still, before the Harlem attack, the CIA appeared to oversee an attack on Malcolm X in Egypt. Malcolm thought he recognized someone in the waitstaff of a restaurant in Egypt. He believed he had seen him in New York. Malcolm almost died from food poisoning that day and believed it was the CIA trying to assassinate him. A high-level French official said that they denied Malcolm X's entry into France for the first time because they didn't want the CIA to pin Malcolm's assassination on them. On February 21st, 1965, in Harlem, Malcolm X was giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom. One of his top security guards, Eugene Roberts, was there with a woman named Joan Roberts, sitting next to Malcolm's wife. Betty Shabazz was sitting next to her, and some of the other kids were sitting next to Betty Shabazz. Betty Shabazz, of course, is seen here. For the first time, a large number of uniformed police officers weren't present at one of Malcolm X's Harlem speeches, but many undercover police were there from the New York Police Department's Bureau of Special Services, or BOSS. BOSS was a local unit that carried out actions for the FBI's counterintelligence program, often called it COINTELPRO. The FBI had started COINTELPRO in the 1950s to target socialists, communists, anarchists, and other leftist leaders. The CIA had operations such as Chaos, that John just mentioned, that worked closely with COINTELPRO. Unbeknownst to Malcolm X, Eugene Roberts was an undercover agent working for BOSS and COINTELPRO. When Malcolm X started delivering a speech, two people took out guns and started shooting him. Betty Shabazz grabbed her kids and pushed their heads down. When the shooting stopped, Betty Shabazz, a nurse, went to run over to Malcolm. Joan Roberts grabbed Shabazz to stop her. Shabazz threw Roberts into a wall and ran over to her husband. Eugene Roberts was already there and told Betty Shabazz that Malcolm was dead. The importance of Eugene Roberts' role was the first to arrive at Malcolm X's bullet-ridden body and check life signs is underscored by Martin Luther King's assassination. Martin Luther King's friend, William Pepper, seen here conferring with King, spent decades investigating MLK's assassination. The King family then had Pepper, an attorney, represent them for an historic, underreported 1999 trial that found the government guilty of collaborating in MLK's assassination. William Pepper said that Merrill McCullough was a military intelligence agent who had infiltrated MLK's group. McCullough was the first to arrive at King's bullet-ridden body at his assassination, as seen here. McCullough checked King's life signs and then signaled the backup government snipers that the assassination was successful and they could disengage. McCullough received a promotion to the CIA just after MLK's assassination. So this is one parallel between, of course, McCullough and Eugene Roberts. The second parallel I'm going to tell you about in a minute. Eugene Roberts' assassination role is also underscored by his later work against some of Malcolm X's remaining followers in the Shakur family of leftist leaders. After Malcolm's assassination, Abba Shakur joined the Revolutionary Action Movement in New York. His son, Mutulu Shakur, went with him before co-founding the Republic of New Africa, a national group that convened first in Detroit. Eugene Roberts followed Lumumba Shakur, seen here, as he founded the Harlem Black Panther Party chapter. Zaid Shakur co-founded the Bronx Black Panthers. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, seen here, joined the Harlem Panther chapter and married Lumumba. Undercover police intelligence agent Eugene Roberts helped police frame and indict 21 of the New York Panther leaders, including Lumumba and Afeni Shakur, as well as Daruba bin Wahad, who should be here tonight, not here already. The Panther 21 decided to have Afeni Shakur first released on bail as their spokesperson, and she was elected the Harlem Panther leader at that time. She got pregnant with Tupac during that time out on bail, and Lumumba divorced her soon after. Afeni defended herself in court, helping get all of the Panther 21 found not guilty. Meanwhile, Zaid Shakur tried to mend what the FBI manufactured as the East Coast versus West Coast Black Panther War. The FBI used undercover agents and fake letters to help create that war. The FBI chased Zaid underground, where he was soon joined by his and Afeni's close Panther comrade, Assata Shakur, seen here. Zaid helped co-found the Black Liberation Army. Afeni moved in with Zaid and Lumumba's adopted brother, Matulu. Matulu is seen here with a young Tupac on his lap. While helping lead the Republic of New Africa, Matulu was assistant director of Lincoln Detox in the Bronx, using acupuncture for addictions treatment. I was trained there myself a number of years ago. One of Afeni's close comrades, Los Angeles Black Panther Watani Tayahimba, helped co-found the New African People's Organization, or NAPO, in the 1980s. This is Watani up here. Tupac Shakur grew up in this environment of radical black leaders. When Tupac reached 17, he was elected as the youngest ever chairman of NAPO's young adult group, the New African Panthers. They were the same age as the original Black Panther Party members and were active in 8 cities nationwide at that time. Tupac only left that leadership position after about a year into it when Digital Underground asked Tupac to tour with them internationally. Tupac thought he could accomplish more with music than with his Panther leadership. What followed was an exhaustive attack on Tupac after he landed his first solo record deal. I don't have time to list all the attacks on Tupac, but several days after Tupac's MTV worldwide release of his political song Trapped, police arrested him for jaywalking, pounded his head against a curb, and choked him unconscious with a nightstick. I cited 2 other cases where people died due to these police actions. When Tupac was riding from San Francisco premiere of his first movie Juice to the Oakland after party in early 1992, someone conducted an unsuccessful drive-by shooting on his limousine. I found a separate case where police were caught using an unmarked car to conduct a drive-by shooting on a key witness in a high-profile police brutality case in California. Around the spring of 1992, Tupac decided to take on a fake gangsta persona in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them. Watani Tayahimba confirmed that was part of the thug life movement he devised with his stepfather, Matulu. With this thug life movement, Tupac joined his extended Panther family in helping spread the Bloods versus Crips peace truces that had started in Los Angeles and were starting to spread nationwide. And this is a local Los Angeles newspaper article about the Bloods Crips peace truces. Of course, most of the country didn't find out about these peace truces. Tupac and Matulu also had a thug life code that tried to lessen the damage gangs did to their own community, and the movement sought to politicize other rappers. Tupac also usually had leftist political messages in some of his lyrics, such as saying, "We've got money for war but can't feed the poor." In August of 1992, on the exact 3-year anniversary of what I argue was Panther National co-founder Huey Newton's assassination, strangers punched Tupac for no reason and then shot at him at the San Francisco area Marin City Festival. Of course, this is Huey Newton you see here. Police passively watched without arresting anyone until Tupac crawled under one of their cars. Then, after they arrested Tupac, they only arrested him and his stepbrother Matulu Shakur, who was, his stepbrother Maurice Mopreme Harding, who was Matulu Shakur's son. And they saw the gunman that had shot at Tupac. It was within sight of them, according to witnesses, but they failed to do anything about them. San Francisco FBI Director Richard Held was caught lying about Newton's assassination, and this is FBI's Held. Held was then forced to retire early in 1993 after being implicated in a car bombing that nearly killed Earth First leader Judy Barry, seen here. And another former FBI agent who was a whistleblower named M. Wesley Swearingen said that putting crosshairs on a person's picture and nailing it to their door, as they did with Judy Barry, and smearing dog crap on it was a known FBI tactic for warning someone. They used now in late October of 1993, Atlanta police officers who were allegedly off duty ran over to Tupac's car, smashed the side window, and shot at Tupac. They used a gun that they had stolen from an evidence locker, as this book details. Now, this is called a throwaway gun. When they steal a gun from an evidence locker, a police officer in another Tupac trial, in a separate incident, confirmed that this is what is called a throwaway gun normally amongst police. When they get a gun that's stolen from a police evidence locker, it can't be traced back to them. So when they do an illegal shooting, they just put it down, and it can't be traced back to whose it was. Instead of using one of their own revolvers. Okay, guys, I have a little bit more left here, so I'm going to try to speed through it because I'm running out of time here. I'm going to say evidence supports that Tupac was then framed for sexual assault. Okay, just fast forward a little bit. This is Haitian Jacques Agnon, who you might have heard was working. Tupac said in one of his lyrics, was working for the feds. Set me up, wet me up, meaning, of course, framed him and shot at him. An associate of Haitian Jacques had drawn him to a studio lobby where he was shot. Now this is Tupac after the shooting. This is an affidavit that they showed in court that 2 bullets went through the back of his skull and came out the front of his skull, yet he miraculously survived. Okay. This is just award-winning author's book saying that when she talked to the security guards at the studio lobby, they said police asked for the video camera. He offered a video camera film of that incident to police. Police turned it down and closed the case. After that, I argue, I'm just going to fast forward here. This is Michael Warren, who represented Tupac in New York City trial and also a spokesperson for Mumia Abu-Jamal campaign. This is penal coercion tactics they used against Tupac when he was in prison to get him to believe that Biggie might set up that shooting. That created the East Coast versus West Coast rap war. I found they used the same tactics in that war as they used with the East Coast versus West Coast Panther War that they set up between Tupac's mother, Afeni, and Huey Newton on the West Coast. This is Russell Poole, a high-level white police detective who said he found dozens and dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of death row records. And he says he ended up finding out that these police officers were the ones that killed Tupac. They said he was the lead investigator of Biggie Smalls' trial. They said they killed Biggie in order to cover up their murder of Tupac. He was had to resign from the force to try to get this information out, and people still haven't heard of him. Now, I just want to go back one real quick. I'll just when Russell Poole asked his superiors, what are all these police officers doing in death row, they told him you can call them covert agents. Okay. This is Dr. Dre, who they chased out of death row, and Dre, they got to go from saying that weed will make you dumber to promoting weed on his album Chronic. They did the same thing with Tupac. I think they used him to promote weed. Here's Tupac before he got married to Kadea Jones when he was settling down and he was getting away from drugs and alcohol. And, of course, Kadea Jones is Quincy Jones's daughter, so Tupac was marrying into wealth and influence. This is Kevin Hackey, who was employed by both the FBI and the police. He was Tupac's bodyguard. Right before the Las Vegas murder of Tupac, he warned Tupac not to go to Vegas, and thus he was fired by death row and his police officer supervisors. I argue that he turned on the FBI. This is Death Row and Dave. This is, of course, Suge Knight and Dave Kenner. Dave Kenner was the real owner of Death Row Records. This is Black and Gold about Latin King and Queen Nation. They were the largest gang in New York. The gang Peace Juice movement spread to New York, and the Latino version of the Panthers, the Young Lords, convinced Latin Kings to turn into activists, left-wing activists, and stop dealing drugs and killing each other. This is just the media monopoly, which tells about how the media is controlled, and basically they overlap boards of directors between the multinational corporations and the media, and that's how they control the media. And this is from Chomsky and Herman saying how the Pentagon actually owns over 1,300 magazines, making them by far the largest magazine owner in the world. And this is an article by Carl Bernstein, the Watergate muckraker, who found from the Senate Church Committee that well over 400 members of the media were living dual lives in their work for the CIA. And this isn't just low-level reporters. These are the heads of virtually all media organizations. Okay, and of course, COINTELPRO continued, as John said. Agent whistleblowers have talked about its continuance under different names, and so I'd like to tell you more about it, in the question and answer period, though. But thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, our next scheduled speaker is not in the house yet, so I'm going to move on to some coverage, historical coverage by a researcher who spent many years looking into the assassination of Malcolm X, and start with some of that information. And that's Babazak Kondo. And Babazak Kondo is the married father of 7 children. For the past 8 years, he's been a professor of history at Baltimore City Community College. Prior to this, he spent 15 years teaching history and black studies at Bowie State University in Maryland, where he also founded and coordinated Pan-African Studies. He's also taught at Goddard College in Vermont, Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, and Thomas Edison State College in New Jersey. He's the author of Conspiracies, Unraveling the Assassination of Malcolm X, and numerous other works, including Black Student's Guide and a Crash Course in Black History. He's consulted on 4 films pertaining to Malcolm X, including Spike Lee's motion picture, Black Side's Malcolm X, Make It Plain, and Exception's Brother Minister. He's also consulted on 2 documentaries on the Black Panther Party. He's spoken at more than 45 colleges and universities and before hundreds of community organizations and groups. He's also been interviewed on scores of radio and television programs and been featured in numerous newspaper and magazine articles. Babazak Kondo.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here. There's a traditional African practice that I generally follow. I ask either an esteemed elder or the oldest elder in the room to give me permission to speak. I don't have my glasses on, but I understand that Brother Senghor is here, and I'm going to ask Brother Senghor for permission to speak. Thank you, brother. Today, what I want to talk about is a topic that's very close to me. I first read Malcolm when I was 12 years old, and it basically changed my life. And I spent 11 years studying Malcolm's assassination. When I began my study, I began it for political reasons, and as I got further into it, it got much more political than what I would have liked. At any rate, I ended up publishing this book, I guess it's been 20 years, Conspiracies Unraveling the Assassination of Malcolm X. And the short of my thesis, before I get into some of the other stuff, is that I found that there was basically 3 conspiracies, 3 intertwined conspiracies that resulted in the assassination of Malcolm X. One conspiracy was launched by the FBI, which was really the underlining conspiracy. The other was a conspiracy by the Nation of Islam, and the third was by the New York City Police Department DA office. So what I'd like to do in the time that I have is to try, to do my best to kind of give you an outline of how it was that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Nation of Islam, and the New York City Police Department was able to basically orchestrate a very complex assassination, the assassination of Malcolm X. Now, for the record, we need to say that the FBI had developed a very strong disruption campaign against the Nation of Islam. It was strong by 1961, so I kind of want to start in 1961. But by 1963, what I found in my research is that 1963 was the real crucial the real crucial year as far as Malcolm X was concerned. Now, at this time, Malcolm was at his height. You know, he was at the height of his popularity. He dominated news. He was spreading the word of the Nation of Islam, spreading the word of Elijah Muhammad. He was constantly in the news and the press. He was the voice piece of the Nation of Islam. Now, the FBI, of course, because of that and some other reasons, they had actually began its investigation of Malcolm when Malcolm left prison in the 1950s. It began its investigation of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam even before that. But as far as 1961 was concerned, the FBI had numerous electronic surveillance on Malcolm, on Elijah Muhammad, on Elijah Muhammad's family, on the national leadership of the Nation of Islam, which was in fact primarily Elijah Muhammad's family. They had electronic surveillance on various ministers, various captains of the FOI, the Fruit of Islam. They bugged the headquarters, they bugged homes, and they also had live informants as well, people that they basically paid who were already in the Nation of Islam, or sometimes they would pay them to join the Nation of Islam to provide intelligence for the FBI. And the Chicago office, which is where a lot of this stuff is going to come out of, had a large informant population, you know, who was on basically the FBI's payroll. Now, through all of this intelligence, and let me just say for the records, I had to use this intelligence, but in any way, shape, or form do we validate that intelligence. What the FBI did to Malcolm X, what it did to the nation, to Elijah Muhammad, and to numerous other African leaders, it was immoral, it was unethical. They had no right whatsoever to do that. So I just want to make that point. At the same time, there's information from this that we need to grow from, that we need to learn from, and therefore that's why I must use this information. Okay, so I just wanted to just make that real clear. Now, from all of these different electronic sources, as well as the human sources, what the FBI learned in early 1963 was that there was substantial tension between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad's family, which was oftentimes referred to in FBI documents as the royal family. And there's an irony to this as well. There was tension between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad's family, but it was Elijah Muhammad's family that dominated the Nation of Islam's hierarchy. They dominated the Nation of Islam's leadership. Yet Raymond Sharif, who was Elijah Muhammad's son-in-law, he was the supreme captain of the FOI. His wife, Ethel, who Elijah Muhammad wished had been a man, because had she been a man, she would have been the person that he wanted to take over from the nation upon his death. But she was the head of the MGT, which was the Muslim Girl Training and Civilization Program. You had Herbert Muhammad, who was the editor of Muhammad Speaks, which was a newspaper that Malcolm X founded, which would later be used against Malcolm. You had Elijah Muhammad Jr., he was the assistant supreme captain of the FOI, that is, Raymond Sharif's, right-hand man, and he was Elijah Muhammad's son. And then you had Wallace Ward-D Muhammad, who is going to become the minister of various mosques, most notably the Philadelphia Mosque. So basically, they dominated the national leadership. The only other person who was part of the national leadership that wasn't a member of Elijah Muhammad's family was John Ali, who was the secretary of the national secretary of the Nation of Islam. So what was the tension between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad's family? I need to talk about this because this is going to prove very crucial in the tension between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. The tension revolved around various issues, most notably the secession question. As the Nation of Islam grew, it became a very wealthy organization. As the Nation of Islam grew, they developed all types of holdings. They owned property. They lived, the membership lived, the royal family lived in big houses. They had a lot of resources. And so Elijah Muhammad was generally sick during the early 1960s. So one of the big questions was, when Elijah Muhammad dies, who's going to take over? where the royal family thought it should be one of them. Whereas, others thought that it should be Malcolm X. So it's going to be jockeying for the succession that's going to create a lot of the tension between Malcolm and the royal family. There's also some value differences as well. The royal family liked to drive around in Cadillacs. They liked to go first class in a lot of things, whereas Malcolm was much more simpler than that. Malcolm did not, use, Nation of Islam money, so callously as Elijah Muhammad's family, and that was a point of tension as well. And then just personality in general. Malcolm was a worker, and he worked real hard, and in many ways, when Malcolm looked at the family, Malcolm saw people who generally didn't have to do a whole lot, that they were basically living off of the backs of the membership. So all of this is going to create tension between Malcolm and the royal family. Now, in addition to that, the FBI also found that there was tension between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. And this tension stemmed from a few issues. Number one, there was an age difference. If you listen to conversations that Elijah Muhammad had, on the telephone with, relatives, with other people and stuff, it seems like there was a problem that he had with Malcolm's age, with Malcolm's youth. That's going to create a problem. The media attention that Malcolm received, the white press was irresistibly drawn to Malcolm X. And even though if you go back before 1964, every time Malcolm spoke, he always prefaced stuff by saying, "The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches." But it was the fact that Malcolm got so much press, it appears that was tension with regard to Elijah Muhammad based on FBI documents. Another problem that Elijah Muhammad had is that when people, whether it was the media, whether it was, rank and file members or anybody else, whenever the idea came up that Malcolm was the leader of the nation, because Malcolm was out front, because Malcolm was the spokesperson, Elijah Muhammad appears to have not liked the idea that people viewed Malcolm, as the leader, because in his mind, there was only one leader of the Nation of Islam, and that was Elijah Muhammad. And then there were some political differences between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm always wanted to make the Nation of Islam more active in the struggle for African people. Elijah Muhammad always pulled him back because his concept was that they were a religious organization, a religious movement primarily, and if they got too far into the whole political thing, he felt that the government would use hook and crook to try to bring them down. So constantly, Malcolm is trying to push them further out, getting involved in rallies, getting involved in various political issues, and Elijah Muhammad generally would kind of pull him back. So they kind of found a peaceful coexistence, although it seems real clear that there were times when Elijah Muhammad let Malcolm do things, get involved in things, be in debates and other things that he was clearly uncomfortable with. Now, I should also say for the record at this stage of the game, before 1963, Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad, was a love story. Malcolm needed Elijah Muhammad's wisdom, his age, his knowledge. Elijah Muhammad needed Malcolm's youth, Malcolm's diligence, Malcolm's dedication, Malcolm's commitment. Together, these two men formed an incredible dynamic duo. And the FBI was bothered by that. So as you read the FBI documents, and I was able to see the cycle, kind of like follow the trail and stuff, what you see if you read the FBI documents is how the FBI took two men who basically loved one another, who needed one another, who fed off one, and you can see step by step how the Bureau basically took measures designed to pull these two men apart. And the end result is going to end up being extremely tragic. Now, if I had to pick one thing in 1963 that I think began that real split, if you will, it would be the Savior's Day convention in Chicago in 1963. Elijah Muhammad wasn't there because he was sick, so he was in there. He was in his mansion in Arizona. So Malcolm presided, and there was from the very beginning, there was tension between Malcolm and the royal family. And the royal family was constantly calling Arizona, complaining to Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm did this, Malcolm did that. Malcolm wouldn't let Wallace speak until it was too late. Malcolm drove your Cadillac, anything they could find, they were constantly calling Chicago, complaining to Elijah Muhammad about Malcolm. Now, at this stage of the game, Elijah Muhammad generally supported Malcolm, and he would try to mediate and what have you. Now, what ultimately happens here, though, is that Malcolm ends up staying in Chicago after the convention. There were some problems with the Chicago mosque that he wanted to kind of, clear out, and there were some financial things going on. So he was dealing with all those things. But the problem was, it also meant that he was going to spend more time with the royal family. So they were constantly, again, calling, and they called Elijah Muhammad so much, complaining about Malcolm, that Elijah Muhammad finally called Malcolm and ended up, sending Malcolm back to New York. And as I look back on it, that's going to end up being a very important point in all of this. Now, there was something that I wanted to, I generally don't like reading, but I want you to get a feel for how the FBI. This is a memo that was written by the agent in charge of the Chicago office, a man by the name of Marlon Johnson. Marlon Johnson, some of you might remember that name. He was the person who helped to orchestrate the assassination of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark on December 3rd, 1969 in the Chicago apartment. Anyway, he wrote this memo to J. Edgar Hoover on March 11, 1963, and you're going to note something. What he's outlining here is going to be the exact strategy that the FBI is going to use to separate Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. And note, now I know some of the other speakers, I think Cynthia and I'm forgetting that Daruba and I think Mama Nikishi are going to talk about the counterintelligence program. What's going on here is the FBI in this particular document clearly will tell you how they're going to go after Malcolm and separate Malcolm from Elijah Muhammad. They're going to talk about bogus letters. They're going to talk about different things. But I want you to kind of hear this, because this will ultimately be the strategy that they're going to find. And then one other thing that you're going to find interesting. In the end, Johnson is going to make a recommendation that they just simply not do anything for the moment, because as long as Malcolm stayed in Chicago, Malcolm was doing it himself. That is, creating that tension between Malcolm and the royal family, Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. Okay, quote, at this point, and whenever he says Chicago, he's talking about the Chicago FBI. At this point, Chicago does not recommend that any disruption tactics in the form of anonymous letters or phone calls be instituted. It is apparent Elijah Muhammad at this time is backing Malcolm and is giving him to some degree a free hand. It is also apparent Muhammad has no intentions of allowing Malcolm to get out of bounds. Chicago also feels that any anonymous letters or calls at this time could possibly identify the source of the information and could, instead of causing disruption, solidify the royal family and Malcolm. It is felt that Malcolm's presence in Chicago is the most adequate form of disruption possible, as it is causing extreme discontent in the royal family and may well set off a chain reaction which could cause Malcolm to fall in disfavor with Muhammad. So that's one thing. Now, in this, he's going to go on to talk about something else, and this is going to be real crucial to understanding what's going to happen as far as Malcolm is concerned. One of the major tactics that the FBI used during the Hoover era, and I have no doubt that they're still using it, is they would use newspapers. They had what they call certified friends of the FBI. Certified friends were legitimate journalists and reporters who the FBI would either pay or somehow manipulate into either publishing articles that the FBI wrote, and then they would publish it under their name, or the FBI would tell them what they wanted to say, and then the person would write it in their own language and then publish it in whatever newspaper that they had. The FBI is going to use newspaper, they're going to use newspaper articles and certified friends to the maximum degree to separate Malcolm from Elijah Muhammad. So I want you to just hear this last thing, and this be pretty much the last thing that I think I'll read. Chicago, now they're going to outline for us how they're going to separate Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm from the royal family. Quote, Chicago feels that future disruption plans may well play up the fact that Malcolm is the heir apparent and will take over the organization from the royal family upon the death of Muhammad, and may also play up the fact that he may have already taken it over. Chicago feels it may well be to put the NOI, the Nation of Islam, on the defensive as it is felt that they have been on the offensive in the past. Blah, 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 blah. It is felt that the statements made by the NOI leaders are completely false and erroneous and could easily embarrass them if a knowledgeable person could approach the problem. Chicago feels this approach could be instituted. Now, this is what I really wanted you to hear. Chicago feels this approach could be instituted in future articles on the NOI and as they appear in the press. Chicago feels that in the past, such articles have tended to merely show the organizational structure and NOI tenets and have to some degree tended to enhance the organization instead of showing that it is, in fact, a practitioner of slavery, whatever the hell that means. This is what's significant, though. From this point forward, the FBI is going to launch a newspaper campaign, and this is what they do. They listen to the bugs. They listen to the informants. They gather all this data. And then they take this data, like if they hear Elijah Muhammad react to something emotionally, they make note of that. If they hear Elijah Jr. or somebody like that, react to something. And then what they do is the things that got the most reaction, they take that, and then that's what they put in newspaper articles. In other words, they're playing, this is demagogy. Basically, they are basically playing on the emotions from information that they get illegally, immorally, and unethically, and they then use this information in order to get a rise, in order to create more distance. So if they know that Elijah Muhammad has a problem with this ideal of Malcolm being considered the leader, then they'd make sure they would then write an article in the Chicago Sun-Times or the Chicago Tribune or the New York Daily News or the New York Times, whereby they're making a point that Malcolm X is the leader of the Nation of Islam. And I document in my book numerous cases of articles that the FBI basically concocted in order to do this very thing. So let me move quickly now, because I know that my time is probably getting low. From March 1963 to December 1963, Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad become more and more distant, primarily through the newspaper articles as much as anything else. Now, something else that the FBI also did very effectively during this time is bad jacketing. Bad jacketing is the spreading of false rumors. And so what they would do is they would get the intelligence from the bugs, from the electronic surveillance, from the informants, and then they would get the informants to then that information that got the most rise, they would then get the informants to spread this in the mosque. Have you heard what? Malcolm has been telling people that he's the leader, that he's going to take over and all this. In other words, anything they could do. And of course, ultimately, this information gets back to Elijah Muhammad. And what you begin to see happening is a distrust. As 1963 goes on, you begin to see a distrust between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. And then it gets a little bit worse as time goes on, because keep in mind, Malcolm is also in 1963, he's constantly in the news, constantly in the press, constantly on television. He's constantly speaking at colleges and universities. He's making controversial statements. Every time you look around, there's Malcolm. And the FBI knows that bothers Elijah Muhammad, and so they would then plan an article that talks about, how Malcolm is the face of the Nation of Islam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there was one other issue that we need to talk about. It hasn't really come to the fore yet, but there's this idea that Elijah Muhammad, well, it wasn't an idea. Elijah Muhammad had basically impregnated several women who had worked for him in the Nation of Islam. And then what also ends up happening is that then, each of these women, one by one, is then excommunicated, or they're asked to basically lead the Nation of Islam. So that's another problem that's going around, and then ultimately Malcolm kind of steps in and begins to kind of deal with that. Now, what becomes real sad in all of this is that Malcolm had a conversation during the spring of 1963 with Elijah Muhammad. Now, both of them left this particular meeting with two different ideals of what happened. Malcolm left this particular meeting thinking that Elijah Muhammad had given him permission to deal with this problem directly with trusted ministers, with trusted officials. which means that it was okay for him to talk to people that they trusted within the nation to come up with ways to, to strategize about how to deal with the babies. Elijah Muhammad left that same meeting thinking that Malcolm had, had a scheme to deal with this, but he was going to keep it on the down low. So Malcolm gets back. He assembles some of the people that he trusted. There was a group of ministers that was known as Malcolm's ministers within the Nation of Islam. And he assembled them and they talked about it. And what also ends up happening is that each of them, after Malcolm talked to them about it, called Chicago and said, Malcolm is down here spreading lies about you and some babies. And so Elijah Muhammad, as you can imagine, that's going to tee off Elijah Muhammad to the maximum degree. Because and so when he talks about this, he said, why are you spreading this stuff? You said you had a plan. I didn't know your plan was to throw fire on gasoline. And so that's going to create more division between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. By November of 1963, the tension is at its height. Elijah Muhammad is teed off about Malcolm. He doesn't trust Malcolm. This baby thing is growing. And of course, on the sidelines, the FBI is doing anything and everything they can to spread it, to keep it going. And they know that Malcolm is bothered by the babies thing, and they know that Elijah Muhammad, from another angle, is bothered by the baby thing. And the FBI is sitting behind closed doors, giving each other 5 each time one of their disruption or counterintelligence instruments works. So now we're at the end of 1963, and then to make it worse, as if it needed to be worse, Doubleday decides toward the end of 1963 to publish the autobiography of Malcolm X, not the autobiography of Elijah Muhammad. And so that creates even more problems. And then also, during the same time period, Louis Lomax published a book called When the Word is Given, and it deals primarily with the Nation of Islam, but they focus primarily on Malcolm X, not on Elijah Muhammad. So all of these things are just happen to be happening at the same time, and this is the time that John Kennedy was assassinated. And as most of you probably know, after John Kennedy was assassinated, Elijah Muhammad ordered all of his ministers and other officials that if the press come and ask you for a statement, just say, no comment, the country loved this man, and we don't need no negative publicity. Well, Malcolm spoke at Columbia University, a couple days later, and, a reporter asked him, what did you think of the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Of course, Malcolm, not thinking a whole lot, he just basically said, he saw it as a case of a chicken coming home to roost. Now, technically, this is a term that African people always used in order to make the point that things go full circle. And, of course, the press took it a little bit differently than that, and it seemed like he was pouring water on a drowning man. And, of course, that was then the excuse that was used to basically suspend Malcolm. So Malcolm was basically suspended. Now, once Malcolm was suspended, the FBI documents, they get very excited because, of course, they give themselves credit for it. So now the thing is, okay, now that we got Malcolm suspended, the next move is to create a war between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam, between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. And so now they're going to do some of the same things. Okay, I'm being told that I need to, call it a day. But the short of everything right now is that the FBI, step by step, and again, I document this pretty well, you can see how the FBI took 2 people who loved each other and basically separated them. And then after that, what they basically did was they let nature take its course. There were people within the Nation of Islam who loved Elijah Muhammad to the degree that anybody who went after Elijah Muhammad would be viewed as their enemy. And ultimately, Malcolm would be assassinated. The people that killed Malcolm all came out of Mosque number 25, Newark. I identify each of them in my book. Today, a few of them are alive. I think two are alive, and the rest of them are now dead. But it's a horrible story, and hopefully, maybe during a question and answer, we can talk more about it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, returning to the theme of COINTELPRO, is Nkechi Taifa. She's an attorney, an activist, an author, a scholar, and a motivational speaker, also a major catalyst in raising the visibility of issues involving unequal justice. She's testified, written, and spoken extensively on issues of civil and human rights, criminal justice reform, including issues of racism in the criminal justice system, the crack powder cocaine disparity, reentry, police misconduct, and brutality, COINTELPRO, political prisoners, mass incarceration, black heroes and heroines, and international human rights. She delivered opening statements for both the 2007 International Tribunal on Hurricanes Katrina and Rita and the 1967 International Tribunal for Justice for Mumia Abu-Jamal. She is the president and CEO of Legacy Empowerment, a home-based community center which uses racial justice lens and historical framework to enrich the educational, cultural, and financial health of families and communities through training, seminars, cultural events, and consulting services. She received her JD from George Washington University Law School and a BA from Howard University, and I'll just add, she didn't write it in here, that she was also one of the panelists on a briefing on COINTELPRO that was invited to speak by Cynthia McKinney when she was in Congress. Kishi Taifa.
COINTEL's got blacks in hell, they open up our mail, tap our phones and kick our bones and railroad us to jails. COINTEL's got blacks in hell, they open up our mail, tap our phones and kick our bones and railroad us to jail. Angela Davis, Reverend Ben Chavis, the Panthers and Geronimo too, Rochelle McGee all wanted to be free from you know who. FBI went so low they invented COINTELPRO to stop the rise and fire of a black messiah who could unify and electrify the people to revolutionize. Co is for counter, which means to use against. Intel is for intelligence. Pro is for a program they thought it was the perfect solution, counterintelligence program to crush the revolution. So goes the beginnings of a poem that I first wrote in 1977 while working on the defense committee of a group of political prisoners called the RNA 11. And thank you so much, Cynthia McKinney, the conscience of the Congress. I actually did part of that when you had that forum on COINTELPRO. It's always great to see you, Brother Ruba. I mean, you know, we're talking about someone who spent years unjustly in the bowels of the beast. And, you know, Brother Zach, thank you. Brother John, thank you so much for bringing us all together. So basically, just what is this COINTELPRO? And I know I apologize for being late. I was on another panel earlier and got here as soon as I could. So I hope I'm not being too duplicative here. But in the FBI's own words, the purpose of the COINTELPRO, at least the one directed against the Black Liberation Movement, was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist hate-type organizations and groupings and their leadership, their spokesmen, their membership, and their supporters. Now, the FBI memorandum expanding the program described the long-range goals of the COINTELPRO as, number one, to prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups in unity. Now, this is the FBI speaking. It sounds like an African proverb, though. In unity, there is strength. A truism that is no less valid for all its triteness. An effective coalition of black nationalist groups might be the first step toward a real Mau Mau in America, the beginning of a true black revolution. Number two, prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. Malcolm X might have been such a messiah. He is the martyr of the movement today. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Elijah Muhammad all aspire to this position. Elijah Muhammad is less of a threat because of his age. King could be a very real contender for this position, should he abandon his opposed obedience to white liberal doctrines, nonviolence, and embrace black nationalism. Carmichael has the necessary charisma to be a real threat in this way. Number three, prevent violence on the part of black nationalist groups. This is of primary importance and is, of course, a goal of our investigative activity. It should also be a goal of the counterintelligence program. Through counterintelligence, it should be possible to pinpoint potential troublemakers and neutralize them before they exercise their potential for violence. Number 4, hand me my water, please. Prevent militant black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability. Okay, and they analyzed just how that discreditment was to occur by discrediting them to 3 separate segments of the community. The goal of discrediting black nationalists, the FBI said, must be handled tactically in 3 ways. First, you must discredit these groups and individuals to the responsible Negro community. Second, they must be discredited to the white community, both the responsible community and to the liberals who have vestiges of sympathy for militant black nationalists simply because they are Negroes. Third, these groups must be discredited in the eyes of the Negro radicals, the followers of the movement. This last area requires entirely different tactics from the first 2. Publicity about violent tendencies and radical statements merely enhances black nationalists to the last group. It adds, quote, respectability in a different way. And number 5, a final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalist organizations, especially among the youth. Specific tactics to prevent these groups from converting young people must be developed. Now, that same memorandum talked about specific targets. Primary targets of the counterintelligence program should be the most violent and radical groups and their leaders. We should emphasize those leaders and organizations that are nationwide in scope and are most capable of disrupting the country. These targets should include the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM, and the Nation of Islam, NOI. Offices handling these cases and those of Stokely Carmichael of SNCC, H. Rap Brown of SNCC, Martin Luther King of SCLC, Maxwell Stanford of RAM, and Elijah Muhammad of Nation of Islam should be alert for counterintelligence suggestions. And in August of 1967, Hoover ordered the extensive infiltration and disruption of SNCC as well as other formations. Now, according to the congressional committees which investigated the activities of the FBI in the 1970s, the counterintelligence neutralization program, codenamed COINTELPRO, this really was a war program. Neutralization is it not a war term? They were talking about war in America against people like you and I. Okay. According to the congressional committees that investigated it in the 70s, the COINTELPRO was an illegal and unconstitutional abuse of power by the FBI. It was an organized effort to control and limit dissent in the U.S. The Senate Select Committee, chaired by Senator Frank Church, stated, COINTELPRO is the FBI acronym for a series of covert programs directed against domestic groups. Many of these techniques would be intolerable in a democratic society, even if all of the targets have been involved in violent activity. But COINTELPRO, the Senate committee, said went far beyond that. The Bureau conducted a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association on the theory that preventing the growth of dangerous groups and the propagation of dangerous ideas will protect the national security and deter violence. That was in 1976. So how do we know about all of this? You know, COINTELPRO was discovered in March 1971 as a result of an unsolved break-in into the FBI's Media Pennsylvania local office when secret files were removed and released to the news media. Freedom of information requests, lawsuits, and former agents' public confessions deepened the exposure until a major scandal loomed. To control the damage and reestablish government legitimacy in the wake of Vietnam and Watergate, Congress and the courts compelled the FBI to reveal part of what it had done. And as a result of the U.S. Senate investigation led by Senator Frank Church, a comprehensive series of reports were produced. Thus, when the Freedom of Information Act was amended in 1974 to remove a special exemption that had kept the FBI's records secret, the door was open to a massive and unending stream of revelations concerning the details of Bureau misconduct under the COINTELPRO, under such titles as Black Nationalist Hate Groups, the New Left, etc. Millions of pages of documents, despite being heavily censored. You all have seen them all, just entire pages just blacked out, entire, blocks, etc. Revealed the harrowing nature of the FBI's neutralization campaign directed against these groups and many, many more. And the FBI had instructed its field officers to propose schemes to misdirect, discredit, disrupt, and otherwise neutralize specific groups. Close coordination with local police and prosecutors were encouraged. Final authority rested with top FBI officials in Washington who demanded assurance that, quote, there is no possibility of embarrassment to the Bureau. The documents reveal 3 types of methods. Infiltration. Agents and informers did not merely spy on political activities. Their main function was to discredit, disrupt, and destroy. Other forms of deception. The FBI and police also waged psychological warfare from the outside through bogus publications, forged correspondence, anonymous letters. You all have read them all. I mean, it is simply mind-boggling. Telephone calls, similar forms of deceit, harassment, intimidation, violence, eviction, job loss, break-ins, illegal wiretaps, secret examination of bank records, vandalism, grand jury subpoenas, false arrests, frame-ups, physical violence were threatened, instigated, or directly employed in an effort to frighten activists and disrupt the movements. Government agents either concealed their involvement or fabricated a legal pretext. These assaults also included outright political assassinations. You know why we're here today. And I submit, such actions combined were so extensive and vicious that they amounted to acts of terrorism on the part of the government. The history of the FBI's counterintelligence and repression against the Black Liberation Movement began with the establishment of the Bureau itself in 1919. It was J. Edgar Hoover himself who initiated a campaign against the Honorable, President Senghor, against the Honorable Marcus Garvey, which resulted in his deportation as a quote-unquote undesirable alien, despite the fact that he organized millions of people. Okay, he had to be stopped. He had to be destroyed. His movement, disrupted. Counterintelligence tactics used against Black leaders and spokespersons such as Paul Robeson and Richard Wright and Harry Belafonte, you know what I'm saying? Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the list goes on and on. The FBI secretly engaged in campaigns to destroy those whose political views and opinions Hoover did not personally approve. And with this countrywide staff of agents, the FBI organized a vast network of political spies who infiltrated thousands of political, religious, and civil organizations. It trained and coordinated similar operations by other law enforcement agencies at every single level of government. I'm going to just skip because I know I haven't been following my time, but I know it's towards the end. But one time they said, just disrupt, these RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement members, just arrest them, on every single pretext that you can until the evaluation came. Okay, so they spent most of the summer in jail. Disruption, you know what I'm saying? So, although the claimed purpose of the Bureau's COINTELPRO actions was to prevent violence, many of the FBI's tactics were clearly intended to foster violence, and many others could reasonably have been expected to cause violence. And you know about the US organization and the Panthers and the Blackstone Rangers and Republic of New Africa and the I've read the letters. To this day, an elder, he's passed now, he went to his grave, his name was Papa Wells, went to his grave thinking that Mario Bedelli of the Republic of New Africa was stealing money. okay, as a result of lies and distortions that the FBI sent out to people. Disruption, you know. I met Papa Wells. I mean, it just, I couldn't, went to his grave, thinking that. So anyway, as I'm coming to a close, it is deplorable that officials of the U.S. government should engage in such activities. However, quote unquote, dangerous a threat they might have considered the group, equally disturbing is the pride which these FBI officials took in claiming credit for bloodshed that occurred. They were constantly asked and rewarded for being creative and innovative and coming up with new and more better ways to destroy the lives of people in the organizations. Many organizations and individuals did not survive the FBI neutralization program. Some were outright destroyed. Some were seriously weakened and destabilized. Many were unjustly imprisoned. Many are still in prison today. Sundiata Acoli, Assata Shakur can't even come back home, has $1 million bounty on her head. Matulu Shakur, the New York Three, the list goes on and on. Leonard Peltier, don't let me, get started. The only two FBI agents who were ever convicted for COINTELPRO abuses, Mark Felt and Edward Miller, were pardoned by Reagan before they even began to serve their sentences. The pardon of former President Richard Nixon, the failure to prosecute quote-unquote lower echelon officials of the FBI, the pardons of two of the responsible upper echelon officials drastically illustrate a dangerous government tolerance of its own criminal acts, which led Mr. Phelps to remark upon learning of his pardon that he was very pleased because now the FBI agents could carry out their quote-unquote jobs without fear of any restraint. So in closing, what effect did COINTELPRO have? Well, I would say its impact is difficult to assess since we do not know the entire scope of what was done. It is clear, however, that COINTELPRO distorted the public's view of dissident organizations in a way that helped to isolate them and legitimize open political repression. It reinforced and exacerbated the weaknesses of many groups, making it very difficult for solid, durable organizations to be sustained. Its violent assaults and covert manipulation eventually helped to push some of those most committed to withdraw from public grassroots organizing to drive them underground. COINTELPRO also served to convince its victims to blame themselves and each other for the problems it created, leaving a legacy of cynicism and despair that persists today. And finally, by operating covertly, the FBI and police were able to severely weaken domestic political opposition without shaking the conviction of most people in the United States that they live in a democracy with free speech and and the rule of law. So I just want to say those hearings, the church committee hearings of the 70s need to be reopened. We need to know and feel the full panoply of what happened. And those responsible must be brought to justice. They must be punished. Thank you.
I'm especially glad that we have with us someone who was there. Roland Shepard is a writer and activist, former VA of the Painters Union in San Francisco, labor and revolutionary activist, and he was in the Audubon Ballroom in New York when Malcolm X was assassinated. And he's going to talk about what he saw there. A picture that I sent him helped him to positively identify one of the gunmen involved who's still alive, and his writings appear at www.rolandshepard.com. We have an eyewitness with us tonight.
Thank you, John. I spoke for a coalition of political prisoners. Political assassinations. I spoke for the coalition of political assassinations 2 years ago in New York. And I opened that statement, and I'm going to open my statement for tonight with the same statement, and that is that Malcolm X was the most honest mass leader that I ever saw. He was extremely honest, and he was a very human person. And he had compassion for his people and compassion for humanity. Now, Dan Rather, in his program on the documentary on Malcolm X, was questioning the lawyer for Martin Luther King about Malcolm X and the assassination. And the lawyer for Martin Luther King told Dan Rather that knowing what he knows about the assassination of Malcolm X, he can categorically say that the United States government agencies assassinated Malcolm X. He was talking about the assassination of Martin Luther King. What he knows about King, he can uncategorically determine that the government assassinated Malcolm X. And I could say the same thing. The main people behind the assassination is not the patsies that the FBI set up. They were used by the FBI to assassinate any potential black messenger or black messiah. And they saw him as a threat. I'm going to just go into the motive for the government to assassinate Malcolm X. At the time of his assassination, he was the first leader to come out against the war in Vietnam. He used to speak at meetings outside of Harlem. I was in charge of the defense for Malcolm at those meetings. So we were trying to organize, and we're more than likely Malcolm would have spoke at the first march on Vietnam in 1965, which would have given the anti-war movement an entirely different character. He was going to tour the campuses because he saw that young people were in motion and be the most effective to talk to have young people to change society. He had met with Che Guevara, and he was going to speak with Che Guevara and Ben Bella at the Bandung Third World Conference a couple of weeks after he was killed. And he had the power to do things with his speaking. If you ever hear him speak, he could convince people of the point he was going to make. But those factors are motive enough, plus the fact that the OAU, with his intervention into OAU, got the OAU for the first time to oppose racism in the United States. And the government here saw that as a threat because they wanted to do what they do to colonial revolutions worldwide. And the proof is in the pudding. Malcolm X one time did a whole thing on the house Negro and the field Negro. And he had said he identified with the field Negro. He was a field Negro. He wasn't a house Negro. And if Malcolm X alive, the person in the big house in the United States wouldn't be, right now, being able to send troops in 35 places in Africa. They wouldn't have gotten away with it. Nobody's speaking up now, but Malcolm would have. And there's a big difference between that. So that was the motive. They couldn't have him. They knew they were afraid of the anti-war movement. They were afraid of any movement that challenged their society. And also, Malcolm X had came to the same conclusions at the end of his life that Martin Luther King came to, and that this society, this economic society, had to be changed. That you couldn't have freedom for black people in the United States without freedom, economic freedom, and everything else. Because if you don't have any money, you still ain't free. So he was speaking to all those points, as was King. And King was looked to have a coalition of an energized labor movement and other organizations to make for economic justice. And that's what the Memphis sanitation workers strike was all about, and it's why they assassinated him there. So, it's a pretty clear motive. Now, on the day of the assassination, I walked into the room. I was at almost all the meetings except 2 of Malcolm in Harlem. And he knew me by first name. We weren't, close friends or anything, but we talked to each other and he knew me by first name and we talked in first name. And I was going to sell him a paper, which he always bought and promoted at his meeting. And he said, "Not today, Roland," because he came out of a cab by himself. I never saw him by himself go to a meeting. He came by a cab all by himself. He says, "Not today." He was looking over his shoulder. And when I said, "I can't stop, I have to get in." So, I said, okay. Then afterwards, before the meeting started, I go into the ballroom. And Gene Roberts, who was the undercover cop agent who turned up in the Panther trial in New York in '68, comes up to me and says, "You're not sitting here today, Roland." And he says, "You're sitting over here." So I normally sat audience left, but he sat me over here, front row, audience right. So I looked over here, and I saw people who I'd never seen at Malcolm's meetings. I used to see everybody that came. I could recognize and remember faces. But those are people that I saw, and at the beginning of the meeting, Gene Roberts saw him. But Gene Roberts was right there. I didn't know he was a cop agent at the time. I just thought he was, from my own things on defense, he didn't know my name, and he allowed me to go walking right up to Malcolm. And he didn't know me. So I told Shabazz about that, hey, this guy's no good. You can't have a guy like that on defense that doesn't ask who you are when he doesn't know me. So Gene Roberts knew. That was one cop that came out later. And the person that I saw, which I knew at the time, because the flash of the shotgun was in the big burly man was in the audience. But when the shooting started, I looked up for Malcolm, and he was just glaring down at his assassins at that time, standing up tall. I looked up there and I thought, he's standing up tall, the gun shooting and stuff. Then, the blast came and he fell backwards 10 or 15 feet. And I always, every time this time of year, I have images of him dying. But at the time, I knew Malcolm was a large man. But and then it came to my mind that he was really a giant at that time. And so much potential. So I got interrogated in the police station, and they showed me pictures of people, and I didn't want to identify members of Malcolm's organization to the police, which was the the Bossy organization. And I'll get back to that in a second. So I said, well, the only excuse I said, I didn't want to answer questions. I was trying to think what's a good answer that the cops would understand. So I said I had to go to the bathroom a second. I go to the bathroom. Who comes out? That big burly man who either shot the shotgun or was sitting with the people with the shotgun. He walks out of the bathroom in the Harlem Police Station, walks across the banister, through the secretarial pool to his office in the police station. So I knew then, at that time, that the government assassinated Malcolm X. They might have acted as agent provocateurs here and there, but they actually carried out the assassination even also. I knew they did it. And then more facts had come to light. When I read The Judas Factor, he pointed out that by Carl Evans, he pointed out that all the spy agencies on Malcolm X were coordinated by Bossy, Bureau of Special Services Investigations, not BOSS, but Bureau of Special Services Investigations. They coordinated all the spy activity of all the spy agencies in the country. It wasn't just the police. It was all the spy agencies in the country coordinating on Malcolm X. And one other point is that one of the assassins, Thayer, had met with John L. Lee, who was secretary to Elijah Muhammad, the Saturday before. But the Dan Rather show also pointed out that somebody high up in the Nation of Islam and close to Elijah Muhammad was an FBI agent. But the names were blacked out. And it's now pretty clear from other people's observations and everything else that I've read that John L. Lee was an FBI agent himself. But Thayer mentioned the assassins' names. And when I spoke 2 years ago, I mentioned that Zach Condo's description of the man I saw was the same man he wrote about, was the same man, fits the description of the same man I saw in the police station that day. And then the picture, John Judge sent me a picture of William Bradley, who's the person who actually, Thayer said, had the shotgun. And I looked at that picture, and I never would forget that picture my whole life. I could never, the image of the guy, and he had high cheekbones. He had a distinctive face. And, you know, I got reminded when I saw the photo in the police station. I got reminded when I saw him come out of the mentor room, and I got reminded when I saw the picture. So I told John. So I know he did it. So you have all the agencies coming together to assassinate people. You know, you had the spies and everything else in Martin Luther King's organization. But the whole problem with that happened afterwards is nobody has taken up where Martin Luther King and Malcolm X left off. But the FBI and COINTELPRO isn't just the stick. It's the carrot at the same time. Right after King, they set up after King was assassinated and you had the rebellions in every city in the country, it was then they really orchestrated the war on poverty, and they were giving funds to every organization. Any potential leader of the black community, they were giving them funds. All the talented tenths, they were funding the talented tenth. And they were getting bought off by the government. This whole purpose. But they also had the stick. So a good example is the Black Panther Party. in Oakland, they were able to do the free breakfast program, and they had an auditorium in a building that they got that was almost as big as this auditorium. And, you know, Bobby Seale became a professor. That was the carrot. The stick was they assassinated. Who's the guy in Chicago again? Fred Hampton in Chicago, who wouldn't go for the carrot. So, you know, it's very clear. It was a carrot and a stick policy. And the carrot policy worked, and a lot of people were afraid to get assassinated. I know James Chavez said to me, who was a secretary to Malcolm X, that leaders shouldn't leave because the government will assassinate them. So he was a very good speaker and everything else. He could have taken up where Malcolm took off, and he didn't. And then part of the other stuff was there was a woman that there was created jealousy within Malcolm's organization about her, because Malcolm was promoting her, was Sister Sharon, who I thought was the most skilled of any of the people in Malcolm's organization and had the most potential. So we're looking at this, and we're looking at the things, and then I always get reminded of stuff. And one last word, I read the book, The New Jim Crow and the mass incarceration of blacks in this country. And in her chapter, The Fire Next Time, she's not political or anything. She didn't think there was a prison industrial complex till she wrote the book. And her husband is the DA. So I didn't think it would be that good a book, but Glenn Ford interviewed her for the Black Agenda report. So I read the book, and it was a pretty good book, and she seemed to be honest. She came to her own honest conclusions. And she said, we got involved in the political arena, because you had the black Democrats getting elected. I mean, Malcolm X in his speech, in the question and answer and speech of Prospects for Freedom in 1965, during the question and answer period, he says, what you're going to see now is the development of the black politician who initially will feel he's helping his people. And he says, but he's the biggest fool on the planet. Well, what you really see is a fool walking down the street, a cigar walking down the street with the fire on one end and the fool on the other. So he always, when he was going to say something funny, he would always give this infectious laugh. You knew something good was coming up when he talked, because he would go, heh, heh, heh. He knew it was good himself, and he enjoyed saying it, So, the torch has got to be carried. I mean, I have all my essays on the website because I was involved in stuff and that I knew that wasn't in the press, the books. I had met the organizer of the Montgomery boycott and other things, and I was involved in the labor movement, so I thought I'd write about my experiences for anybody that wants to start fighting later, because as Malcolm said, and many people said, if you don't learn from history, history will repeat itself. The mistakes will repeat themselves. And part of the mistakes that you can't, if somebody is accused of something by somebody else in an organization, you should talk to that person directly. You got to confront them directly on what is reported to you to find out if it's true or not. And then you got to have everybody in the organization be required to be active, to be a member. Can't be just a paper member. Because then you're getting, like the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks got more out of the agents than the agents got out of them, because they didn't say anything different in closed rooms than they would say publicly. And so they got the agents to rob the banks because they knew the agents could. Yeah, so you gotta, your organization stuff, and actually my last thing is, we need an organization like the organization of the Montgomery bus boycott, where you had unity of the oppressed, that was democratically organized. It wasn't from on high. It was everything that was decided upon was subject to the vote of the the Montgomery Improvement Association. So when E.D. Nixon, the organizer of the boycott, had a disagreement with the sort of conservative reverends, he said, that's all right, we'll take it up in the mass meeting and we'll see what we do, because they wanted to call off the boycott. They didn't go to the mass meeting. Plus, the organization used the tactic of self-defense. The drivers for the alternative transportation in Montgomery, because you couldn't do a boycott for a year without people being able to get to work, were GIs from the Korean War who had access to the armory, could fix the cars because they were in the car pool, and knew how to use guns, and the Klan knew they were willing to use them. Not one subsequent, their own transportation system, not one got stopped by the Klan when the Klan was blowing up, still burning people's houses and stuff. Not one. 1956, not one got stopped. They couldn't stop the alternative buses. Thank you.
Most you can't see it from up here, but I was trying to project from the website this picture that I had sent to Roland Shepard of the individual that he says, the burly man, the large burly man, still living in New Jersey. So you can go to Roland Shepard and see the picture there. But our next speaker told me he doesn't need much introduction. You may not. Dr. Jared Ball. You know him from WPFW. And he's also the co-editor of A Lie of Reinvention, Correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X. And so he wants to talk about the reality of Malcolm X that led to his assassination.
How's everybody doing? Good evening. It's an honor to be here, and I know who's coming up after me, so I'm going to be brief. Which of course means I'm really not. That's that warning you got to be watching out for when people say they're going to be brief. No, but in all seriousness, I will be. It is an honor to be here. I had asked John not to, don't read my whole bio and everything. I love my wife and my children, and I teach and I do stuff. It's all good. It doesn't really matter. We were asked by Paul Coates a little over a year ago, the editor, former Black Panther Party member in Baltimore, and the publisher, runs Black Classic Press out of Baltimore, and he called one day and said, what do you think of this Marable book? And after I, responded, he was like, well, we need to do our own response. And he asked that I and my co-editor, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, compile a collection of essays responding to Marable's book. Because there's a lot of nuance in that book, it's a big book, and it requires the kind of expertise that we collectively brought to bear. It was also, in the idea of collective work, it wasn't something that we thought any one of us as an individual should try to take on. And I actually think that's probably one of the problems that Marable suffered in his own work, that trying to do it as an individual, even with all his massive resources, he missed a lot of things and did a lot of things wrong. But more importantly, for us, the issue is the ideological approach to the book. So I'll just make a couple of points real quick, and then if there's time for Q&A, we can talk about it. Brother Nati from Everyone's Place in Baltimore has copies of our book, and I just want to shout him out, because I mean, that no disrespect to DC and everything out here, Everyone's Place in Baltimore is the best bookstore I've ever seen in my life. And I first got books from him by accident when I was in the middle of the Red Sea serving this country's military, and it began to change my life. So I just want to shout him out, and I appreciate that. So he's got copies of all of our books there. Please buy them. Much of the proceeds, author proceeds from our book will go to political prisoners anyway, so it's just keeping it moving. So our purpose with the book, A Lie of Reinvention, Correcting Manny Marable's Malcolm X, in this event today is to attempt a correction of the record regarding Malcolm X, not only to honor the man, but also the movement from which he was produced and the brilliantly militant ideologies for which he became one of history's best spokespeople. The world as he knew it was radically unjust and required an equally radical response. Our problem today is that the world we know is worse, more radically unjust than ever, and yet the radical responses called for by Malcolm X and others are depicted by so many as unnecessary. While our lived experiences are worse and worsening, we are told again and again that it is no longer by any means necessary, but instead that it is unnecessary to engage in any means. We are told we are free, equal, improving, but because our reality belies these claims, we simply could not let them go unchallenged, as those lies are retold in skillful nuance in Marable's book. So our point has never been that Malcolm X reinvented himself or requires reinvention, nor is it that we think, as many keep arguing, that Malcolm is in need of being humanized. Our position, collectively stated, is merely that Malcolm X be remembered, engaged, and the ideas with which he grappled be the centerpiece of new forms of political organization. And why? Because, as others have pointed out, and will continue to, 2% of the world has more than half of the world's household wealth, while the bottom half of the world's population has 1% of the wealth. The 3 richest men in the world have more money than the poorest 48 countries. Black long-term unemployment is at its highest rate since 1948. Black poverty is so constant that it has been referred to as being a permanent recession. The extension of slavery through mass incarceration is evident in the fact that there are now more black people in prison than were held as slaves at the height of enslavement. And according to the Malcolm X grassroots movement, every 36 hours in this country, a black woman or man is killed by the police. Every 36 hours, a black woman or man is killed by the police in this country. In fact, Malcolm, whose interaction with media deserves its own category in media theory, knew full well the need to distort his image and what he represents, because as history now shows, those who truly adhered to and organized around his politics were themselves assassinated, exiled, and imprisoned to this very day. And as I was saying earlier this morning, in the very state next door to us in Maryland, Marshall Eddie Conway, to name one example. So it is an honor to struggle around his image and work to be part of an event like this. As has been said, this is a living tradition in history, and one with which we must continue to engage. And that's a line I borrowed from Dr. Greg Carr, who chairs African American Studies here, and quietly worked very hard to help us out at the last minute earlier today when we were struggling with this event. So let me just go through a couple of more points very quickly here. How much time have I already used? Okay, that's fine. But I want to be shorter. There are really so many problems with Manning Marable's book. We don't have the time to go into them, so I will just quickly run through just a few of them, because as we have argued that more than false, we have by book title unapologetically laid down our claim that his reinvention is a lie. It is a carefully constructed and intentional political reshaping of one who is as important a conduit for an exemplar of militant politics as the world has ever seen. The basis of our challenge, or why Marable has given, as one of our contributors, Margot Arnold, points out, the black radical collective consciousness, the blues, starting with poor scholarship. On page 490 of the book, Manning Marable says that everything written in the 1990s, which includes the work of Zach Kondo and others, was useless. And yet he well, I guess he preemptively, in the previous 400 pages, borrows heavily without attribution from all of those works. So if you read Kondo, if you read Bill Sales, if you read Goldman and so many others, there's nothing revelatory in Manning Marable's book. It is establishment revisionism and reconciliation with an Obama era, or what is the antithetical negation. If you read the epilogue of the book, it will explain to you why what you've read in the previous 600 pages may have been somewhat confusing if you thought you were reading about Malcolm X. Because the conclusion is meant to situate a contemporary book within this Obama era and make it seem like Obama is an extension of Malcolm X's politics. And I want to just be very clear, because I think as many of us as possible need to be this clear. You cannot like Obama and Malcolm X. I just want to be very clear. Now, this is not just a matter of my opinion, and I would encourage you not to take my word for it. Just look at the record. You cannot look at the record of a Malcolm X and the record of a Barack Obama and the histories of the two men and the trajectories from which they come, and then say that, and then reconcile the two. They are antithetical to one another. They are diametrically opposed to one another. Malcolm X was brought from the movement up. Barack Obama was delivered from on high downward. Read Paul Street and other people's work. Black Agenda Report has been covering this for years. Please go back if you don't believe it. But you cannot like both. You can try to come up with as many mental and political tricks to justify voting for Obama or supporting him as you would like, but the two cannot be reconciled. I just want to reiterate that. The book, Manning Marable's book, A Life of Reinvention, which again we are calling A Lie of Reinvention, is a product of Columbia University, Viking Press, or the subsidiary of Penguin Press, one of the 6 largest publishing houses in the world. And as Bill Strickland says in our book, Marable forces his book to succumb to the wills and wishes of an establishment press, something to that effect. Forgive me, Professor Strickland. But his point, obviously enough, is that the book had to be constructed to support what a major dominant press would want, and that to make it become a New York Times bestseller, to make it be a Washington Post bestseller, you have to produce a version of Malcolm X that is supported by a largely white, liberal, mainstream reading audience. And Malcolm X obviously cannot be reconciled with white liberalism either. So you could start to, without getting into the details of the book, start to see where it starts to fail. I started to show a clip. I'll just ask you all to Google this. Wendy Wolf is the publisher who worked, as she says, very closely with Manning Marable as an editor at Viking Press to produce this book. I encourage you to go, you can go to imixwhatilike.org, our website, and you can see a video that she gives with our little breakdown of a talk she gave at a Dr. King presentation. And you can hear from her explain, really, she just lays it out. She really tells on herself. And I, in fact, wish I had seen this before we had gone to press with our book. Because she explains in her presentation how Manning Marable's book was crafted into this establishment denial of what Malcolm X stood for. But let me just quickly go through a couple of other things here very quickly that we deal with in our book. We call it, we discuss it in terms of ideological propaganda and psychological warfare, targeting for destruction the ideas of black nationalism, Pan-Africanism. They attack Kwame Nkrumah, just a drive-by assault on Kwame Nkrumah as if he didn't even deserve a full few pages to dismiss him. You know, if you're going to do that, at least give us a couple pages. They just drive-by annihilate Kwame Nkrumah as if that is, anyway. They attack Marxism and Leninism. They attack anti-imperialist struggle. The book attacks, and I'm saying they because if you watch Wendy Wolf, she tells on herself that she basically, I can't say definitively wrote the book, obviously, but she helped craft the ideological trajectory of the book, and she says as much. They attack anti-imperialist ideologies. They attack the notion of revolutionary violence or armed struggle. They marginalize the women in Malcolm X's life, those that he loved and those with which he worked, and they de-emphasize state involvement in his assassination. In fact, as Mumia Abu-Jamal recounts in his Part 2 review of Manning Marable's book for us, he calls it a tragedy that they don't even mention COINTELPRO at all. Now, how you do that when he was, as Nkiji was saying a minute, he was the martyr that they identified and then warned everybody else against becoming. So when just very quickly, what Wendy Wolf ends up saying, she's in this video that I think helps isolate where we are. Okay. She says, I'm no expert, but then defines Manning Marable and the pop cultural critic or journalist Touré as legitimate experts on Malcolm X. She said that she came to Malcolm X fearfully. She was afraid of Malcolm because she grew up in a white liberal southern town. So she was always, when she came up, when she first heard of Malcolm, her whole life she's been afraid of Malcolm X. She talks about her liberal tendencies that were appeased by Marable's rendition of Malcolm. She references Malcolm X's, quote, native intelligence, which evinces her inability to know, interpret, or appreciate the radical traditions impacting Malcolm X or the application of those traditions. She credits Malcolm, this is deep right here, this is beautiful right here. She credits Malcolm's what she calls Malcolm's transformation to the very state apparatus. She says, only in America could his transformation be made possible. I mean, come on, man. I mean. Spike Lee did the same thing, and yeah, I'm going to talk to you about it. We were airing your 92 speech the other day as much as we could when you dealt with that movie back then. Anyway, she disrespects the manifestation of black radical collective consciousness and the visage of an elder sister. Now, if you watch this video, if you can't suffer all the way through it, go to the end, because at the end of her talk, there's a sister sitting in the front, an elder sister sitting in the front, who very politely says, you know, there are a couple problems with the scholarship in the book. Could you address a few of these concerns? Wendy Wolf's response is to not respond at all. She literally turns away and goes on to another question, which is, by the way, been the response from Marable's research team and all of his supporters when I and my colleagues have challenged them to debate. We've invited Zahir Ali, the chief researcher, who's happy to go on tour and collect big paychecks to talk about Marable's book, but will not come on my show. I told him, for my little radio show, I will give you all of the questions weeks in advance that I want you and your team to have answers prepared for, so you will not be ambushed. You know well in advance what I'm going to ask you and what I'm going to be looking for, and then you can come on the show when you're ready and your crew is ready. Wouldn't do it. And in fact, there have been several panels to which I've been asked to attend to debate or discuss this with him that he has signed on to and then canceled in advance of our appearance. So we have, as of today, never had a chance to publicly, and there are people who are out there who email me quietly trying to tell me I'm wrong, who I've challenged to debate me publicly because it should be a community discussion. It's not about Jared and whoever else, and they won't do it either. So anyway, she concludes with Marable's conclusion of Malcolm X that is consistent with her own views, hence her use of we in reference to the writing of the book of, she uses the word we in reference to writing the book with Marable, almost as much as he uses words like maybe, probably, and phrases like might have as he talks about evidence that he's supposedly offering. If you go through the book, and somebody told me not too long ago they had the Kindle edition and just did a search through the thing of how many times maybe and probably and might have were used, and the count was just too high. But he uses all kinds of those things to all these empty phrases and conjecture to make arguments that are not supported. The last thing I just want to find, and I want to shout out Brother Kaba here, who texted me during our program the other day and put me on to a book that I had not read yet, the Eugenio and Pierce book on assassinations. And in reading it over the last couple of days, I'll end here with what I think are some succinct points to make about how Marable's ideological position, or as Amiri Baraka talks about in our book, his position as a democratic socialist as opposed to a Marxist-Leninist or a revolutionary nationalist or anything like that, situates him in such a way that he is ill-prepared to interpret Malcolm X for us. And here are just a couple examples I got from the Eugenio and Pierce book just the other day. And if you read Marable's book, for instance, as I've done, if you take Kondo's book or Sale's book and go back and forth with Marable's, it makes it much easier to see everything that he does. And this is what I did with the Eugenio Pierce book the other day. There's a part that was mentioned earlier, there's a point mentioned earlier where Malcolm X goes throughout Africa and meets with all the leadership and tries to convince them to have the OAU bring charges of crimes against humanity against black people to the United Nations. They don't quite do exactly what Malcolm X had hoped they would do. They make a point about the racism in this country, but they don't quite go as far as he was hoping that they would in his first attempt at this, mind you, right? It was his first attempt at doing this. In the De Eugenio book, they use this to make the point that this is evidence of the threat he waged, as people up here have already made, that he waged against the United States government. That he was a threat even in the attempt to have all of this African unity occur and bring charges against the United States to the United Nations. In Marable's book, that same incident is recounted as a failure of Malcolm X, leaving it just like that. He failed at doing this, now let's move on, as if to say he was just, randomly out there struggling to find some kind of something to make happen, and he failed, so let's just move on. Nothing in Marable's book is brought, he doesn't say anything about how this would have been proof of the threat that he presented to the United States government. One other example is the firebombing of Malcolm X's house. Manning Marable recounts this only to make the point over and over again, as the New York City Police Department and the Fire Department and the FBI did, that this was Malcolm X trying to get press coverage by bombing his own home, risking the lives of his wife and children, because he was that desperate. Marable just parrots that analysis. In the De Eugenio and Pierce book, they remind us of the fact that Malcolm had met with a brother named Canty, who had been in the fire department, who helped him and Betty unearth evidence to show that a Molotov cocktail had been placed on their dresser in their bedroom, could have only been placed there by somebody in a New York City Police Department uniform or fire department uniform, meaning that it had to have been a government-involved conspiracy to bomb his house. So not only do they take it out of the hands of just the Nation of Islam and put it back into the federal government, but quite unlike what Marable does, which he just parrot popular mainstream reactionary government sources to discredit and disparage and take another pot shot at Malcolm X. This kind of thing is done throughout the book, throughout 600 pages, all so that he can conclude that Malcolm was on the same quote-unquote race-neutral path that we have now more or less strived to reach with Obama's presidency. I'll stop there. There's just so much more. But the point is that I think ultimately, and I think all of us agree, all of the contributors to our book agree, that the point is to, again, attack the history of Malcolm X, to attack the ideologies and the ideas he was struggling with, so that those of us who might pick him up again today will be confused into disunity, into disorganization, and to nothingness and motionlessness. At a time where people all around the world are attaching themselves and reintroducing themselves to radical political organization, to even the Occupy movements and all these other types of things, we have to be reminded that this is not the way to go. Malcolm has nothing for you. Don't worry about it. He was just, trying to reinvent himself out of his hustler ways, engaged in all kinds of infidelities and homosexuality. Don't worry about him. Don't worry about all the things that he was actually doing. One more point I do have to make, though, about what Marable does. Unlike Bill Sales' book, this is one of the points I always try to make when we talk about this, because to me it's actually one of my favorite. When Bill Sales talks about Max Stanford or Muhammad Ahmed and Ram's relationship with Malcolm X, he talks about it as being the goal to develop an urban guerrilla warfare movement within the United States. That Malcolm's work with them, and in fact the OAAU, Bill Sales says, was initially going to be called the Afro-American Freedom Fighters, and then they agreed that that was too overt, we'll reel it back and go back into some underground activity. But in Marable's book, Max Stanford is only interviewed, Muhammad Ahmed is only interviewed to talk about, to speculate on Malcolm's psychological state at the time that they were meeting. There's no discussion of the politics, there's no discussion of the actual efforts that they were engaged in. It's completely omitted. Even if you want to discredit it, you have to mention it. And that's why, again, Howard Zinn used to say omission is worse than lying, because if you omit it, you don't even leave somebody a trail to investigate. And that's a lot of what Marable has done. And I'll stop there. I obviously invite you to Q&A, obviously invite you to buy the book and to read as much about Malcolm and to have him influence all of our behavior much more than it does. And I thank you for your time. And as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace.
Our next speaker is Daruba Al-Mujadid bin Wahad, and he's an American writer and activist, former prisoner, Black Panther Party leader, and a founder of the Black Liberation Army. He spent a total of 19 years in prison. When he was incarcerated, he learned about congressional hearings that disclosed the existence of COINTELPRO, and he filed a lawsuit against the FBI and the police department. As a direct result of that lawsuit, in the next 15 years, the FBI released more than 300,000 pages of documents on COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO documents were the basis on which Wahad appealed his conviction, and on March 15, 1990, Justice Peter McQuillan, a Supreme Court Justice of Manhattan, reversed it, ruling that the prosecution had failed to disclose evidence that could have helped Mr. Wahad's defense. District Attorney Robert Mogenthau stated he planned to appeal the ruling and would obtain a retrial. If his appeal failed, Wahad was freed and released without bail. And his attempt to appeal it in 1995, his office stated there would be no retrial, indicating that the current condition of the evidence would make it impossible. Daruba bin Wahad.
Seems like I came to Baltimore and lost everything. Good evening, everybody. First of all, it's an honor and a delight to be here with the brothers and sisters on the panel. I haven't seen Zach since 1922. Cynthia, my sister over here, I haven't seen her in a long, and Akichi, oh my God, I haven't seen her since I got out of prison. So this is like an old home week for me. And so I'm really glad to be here and been invited by the conveners. And I just want to say that most of the presenters have touched on all of the things that I was going to talk about in detail. Zach talked about the subjective and the political and the organizational tensions that surrounded the last days of Malcolm and his relationship in the nation. And Kichi talked about the counterintelligence program, what it was intended to do as a war program. We know that the assassination of Malcolm changed the paradigm of debate in this country, as did the assassination of King. And I just want to, seeing that all of the brothers and sisters up here have touched on the vital parts of the assassination, I want to say that, in my view, one of the most significant things about the assassination of Malcolm, and some of the speakers here touched on it, was that it changed the paradigm of public debate in the African community. No longer in the African community was there a leftist or nationalist or pro-black position that can be argued around those issues that affected our lives. The whole debate moved to the right. And I want to read something to you briefly by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Giroux. And he wrote that what is missing in the current debates dominating politics today is the recognition that the real issues at stake are not the debt ceiling or the state of the economy, however important these things are, but a powerful and poisonous form of authoritarianism that poses a threat to the very idea of democracy and the institutions, public values, informative cultures, and public spheres that nourish it. In the United States, and I've pointed this out time and time again, in the United States, the debates around the issues that affect our lives are debates that have been formulated and manufactured by the establishment, by the powers that be. the parameters of the debates have been established by the establishment and the powers that be. So that when you debate an issue or talk about an issue outside of the parameters of the accepted wisdom, you are labeled insane, crazy, radical, dangerous, violent. But when you discuss reform of a system that requires abolishment, you know, we need a new abolitionist movement here in America. We don't need a reform movement. We need an abolitionist movement. And when we talk about reform, we're talking about recreating and reinventing the same mechanisms of oppression in new guises. You know, I call Obama the political antichrist. I have told many of my comrades and brothers and sisters that Barack Obama is the slickest thing that white supremacy could do since the Emancipation Proclamation. And the reason why I say this, and Jared pointed this out when he talked about the absolute dichotomy between what Malcolm stood for and what Obama is about and what he stands for. And I want to draw this out just for 1 second. I want to talk about assassination as a modification of dissent. Assassination as a strategy of modifying public debate, modifying the political paradigm. And when we look at the assassinations that were the most significant in the 60s, the assassination of Dr. King, the assassination of Malcolm X, even the assassination of Robert Kennedy. When we look at these assassinations, they all had what effect? Of changing the locus of the debate that was moving towards revolutionary consciousness, revolutionary understanding, an anti-war movement that was beginning to become anti-imperialist generally. Now we need to understand something. Both Malcolm and Martin were assassinated when they attached the African diaspora situation here in America with the wars of the United States abroad, with U.S. foreign policy, with U.S. involvement in support of colonialism. One of Malcolm's major speeches was how Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. He talked about the plot to kill Patrice Lumumba. He talked about Vietnam. He talked about why the Bandung Conference was necessary. He talked about black nationalism. Malcolm said that he was an advocate of black nationalism, and he broke down what he meant by black nationalism. To Malcolm's view, black nationalism was black people controlling the lives, economy, and all of the different aspects of their community. Now, in order to be a black nationalist under those in that context, in a society in which you were supposedly citizens, means that there was a paradigm of political disempowerment, of dispossession that accrued to black people that didn't apply to any other people in this country. And that politics and that historical reality was dispossession. African people in this country were brought here as slaves, and they have suffered a policy of dispossession. We have no inheritance of wealth to pass on because we have no wealth. We were never paid for the hundreds of years of labor, so we have no wealth. We have no property. All the property was taken after the Civil War during the Reconstruction. So what do we have? We have the ambivalence of being second-class citizens. And Malcolm asked you, what is a second-class citizen but a first-class slave? So we need to understand that Malcolm began to break down the paradigm of black oppression in this country as a form of domestic colonialism, as a unique form of domestic colonialism. That the black communities existed within a society that had as its founding ideology white supremacy. And that ideology of white supremacy had undergone changes over the years since Reconstruction, but it still remained fundamentally the same. And Malcolm said, what is the difference between a Dixiecrat and a Democrat? And what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat? They both are dogs. One's a wolf and one's a fox. So Malcolm broke down that the condition of African people in this country required independent thinking, independent political organization, and understanding of colonialism and imperialism. This is what Malcolm talked about. Martin Luther King, on the other hand, who came from the institution of the black church, who was brought up in the mainstream of black bourgeois culture, black middle class institutions, whose father and grandfather were preachers right here, right in Atlanta. He had access to all of the institutions of the black elite. And he took a moral position on the human rights and the civil rights of African people in this country. And you got to remember, when Martin first started out, his own class and his own people were against him. He had to write a letter from a Birmingham jail to his fellow clergymen and said, if not now, when are we going to protest about this? After he got the Nobel Peace Prize, he said that the United States government, how could he talk about violence in the ghetto when his own government was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world? The minute that Martin Luther King started talking about the same things that Malcolm X talked about, they both were assassinated. Robert Kennedy, a white boy, gunned down when it became apparent that he would have won the presidency if he would have got the nomination. And why is that important? Why was his brother assassinated? Why was his brother assassinated? We have a little island 90 miles off the coast of Florida, Cuba. And Cuba has been under embargo ever since the Bay of Pigs and ever since the so-called Cuban crisis. Cuba has been under embargo since the late 1950s. Just remember that. An embargo is an act of war. Cuba has been surrounded and embargoed by the United States. And it was embargoed by the United States because the CIA made a miscalculation about Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution and could not swallow that miscalculation. That miscalculation led to the impasse that we have today in Cuba. And the CIA and the Dulles brothers and the architects of the Cold War hated John F. Kennedy for going up against them and not carrying out their policies. And they destroyed him. Now, there's plenty of conspiracy theories of whether the mafia killed him, whether the CIA killed him, whether the KGB killed him. It's all irrelevant. We're talking about assassination in America as a means of moving the public debate to the right. And in every case where the assassination took place, the public debate moved inexorably to the right. This is very important to understand because the consolidation of right-wing power in this country is manifested today. And it's manifested in the choice of Barack Obama for president by U.S. finance capital. Barack Obama was picked to be the president of this country when he was at Harvard Law School by the freedmen capitalist faction of the U.S. ruling elite. And for those of you who don't know the Chicago Freedmen School of Law, School of Economics, it's about finance capital being democracy. So today we live in a society that has the facade of a democracy, but has the marriage of the corporate elite and the state. And any marriage between corporations and the state is called fascism. So we're living in a society, a unique society, that's democratically fascist. This is a democratically fascist state. And that Obama has carried out, has brought into fruition laws and statutes that you and I would have never permitted if it was George Bush. The fact that he has brought these prohibitive and repressive laws into existence, expanded the U.S. torture program, expanded the U.S. black sites, carried out drone attacks, have moved the world into a whole new level of impersonal warfare. You know, when you don't come home in body bags, when Johnny doesn't come home in body bags, it's pretty easy to go to war. When you know your son is sitting up in an office somewhere playing video games and killing people 5,000 miles away, that's easy war. But the point is that the President of the United States today is perceived by people of African ancestry, the victims of the counterintelligence program, the targets of repression and right-wing consolidation in this country for the last 50 years. For over 50 years, this country has consolidated right-wing power under the military, the police, and corporate finance capital. And the first movement that emerged to protest this after the economic decline and breakdown in this country was the Occupy Wall Street movement. And what did they talk about? That capitalism was the enemy. That they were 1%, that the 1% controlled this society, and they were the 99%. Where was their mortgages going? Where were the jobs? Where was the infrastructure? Where was the health care? Where was the schools? What was this economy in this country about? We bailed out Wall Street. We bailed out the auto industry. We bailed everybody out, but when it came to ordinary poor people, there's no bail money out here. There's no bail. All during the political campaigns, they talked about the middle class. Nobody mentioned the word P-O-O-R, poor. That's you and me. Middle class. Who's the middle class in America? Who's the middle class under modern finance capitalism? So the assassination of Malcolm X was very important, because now whenever we debate police brutality, stop and frisk, racial profiling, no one talks about these contradictions of racism in the context of black nationalism. No one talks about it in the context of a radical analysis from the left. All of the analysis is from the middle to the right. There is no left in America no more. There is no progressive movements in America anymore. The unions have been demoralized, they have been disorganized, and they have been beaten down. And the rise of the corporations is clear because a corporation has more rights, more civil rights, and more legal rights than you do. Corporations are considered an individual. They're considered a person, a corporation. Well, if they consider the person, how come none of them ever go to jail whenever they commit crimes? Nobody's in jail out of the 2.5 million that came from corporations. There's over 20 million people in this country that have felony convictions and are out of jail with felony convictions. So what we're looking at when we look at the assassination of Malcolm and the assassination of Dr. King is we look at the modification of the politics of this country by murder. By murder. Malcolm X has been more effective dead than he was alive. When the brother just talked about it, when he last saw him, he got out of a taxi by himself. He was getting out of a cab coming into an event by himself. In the last days, Malcolm was by himself. All these people today that quote him and that say they love Malcolm X, when he was alive, the man was by himself. And this is very important to understand, because in order for them to destroy Malcolm, they had to isolate him. In order for them to destroy Malcolm, they had to vilify him. And his means of vilification was to use the very organization that he had joined and that had opened up his eyes and moved him forward, the Nation of Islam. And when we look at the counterintelligence program, we have to understand that those organizations that were left standing after the 1960s are the same organizations that you have today that stood idly by while they created the prison industrial complex. You got to remember, 2.5 million people didn't go to jail in the last 20 years, and nobody was on the watch. Jesse was a national leader. Reverend Al was a national leader. Minister Farrakhan was a national leader. They created the prison industrial complex on their watch. Did they talk about prisons? Did they talk about the massive incarcerations of black youth? Did they talk about political prisoners? Did they talk about the political repression? Hell no. They were calling for more cops. Remember when they were talking about hip-hop being violent, they were calling for cops in the community. When crack epidemics hit the streets, who were the radicals that were talking about the police and the government was distributing drugs in the black community? The Black Panther Party talked about the government's involvement in drug distribution and heroin distribution ever since World War II. And it was put off as radical rhetoric. And how many essays, how many journalistic stories have come down the line in the last 20 years to show that the U.S. government was involved massively in drug distribution in the black community? We have the Les Payne's the heroin trail. We have the other one about crack cocaine and the Contras. All of these exposés show that the U.S. government was heavily involved in the drug trafficking. But when the left said these things, they were marginalized. But it was true. Whenever the left says things today, it's marginalized. I'm going to speak up at Skidmore College in a couple of days.